She's just a young child going to school for the first time. However, she is totally surprised at what they teach in
Who
school.
wants to try 3 plus 3?
3 plus 3? Really?
I beg your pardon?
What kind of school is this anyway? All right, but everyone knows it's 6.
Barry, can you stand up, please?
When the unsuspecting teacher decided to test her knowledge, it was the teacher who needed to use a calculator at the end.
That's good. Well, what is 57 plus 135?
192.
Yeah? Can you tell me what 57 multiplied by 135 is?
Welcome back to Flick Recap. Please, do not forget to subscribe to the channel.
Who can tell me what for
7,695. The square root is 87.7 and change. Now what does ad nauseum mean?
At the beginning of the movie, Frank Adler is seen preparing his niece, Mary, for school. He tells her that he's made a special breakfast for her, but Mary is reluctant to go and offers excuses. She even expresses worries about her one-eyed cat, Fred. However, Frank reassures her that Fred will be fine and insists she gets ready. When Mary asks about the special breakfast, Frank reveals it's simply a box of cereal with the word special written on it, much to her disappointment. After seeing her off to the bus, Frank watches as Mary heads to school for the first time, and his neighbor, Roberta, follows him back home, expressing concern about Mary going to school. She worries something might happen to Mary, and even Frank appears anxious about her starting school. Meanwhile at school, Mary looks unhappy and out of place. As her teacher, Miss Bonnie begins to walk around the class. She asks the students simple math questions. Mary, feeling the questions are beneath her, looks at Bonnie and the other students in clear disappointment. She called Bonnie's attention to this and the teacher chose instead to ask her some specific question. So, Bonnie starts asking Mary more difficult questions, and she answers them with ease. However, as the questions become even more challenging, especially with multiplication, Mary hesitates briefly. Bonnie, seeing this as a sign to stop, chooses to continue with the class, but after a few moments of silence, Mary answers the multiplication problem correctly. Bonnie checks her answer with a calculator and is surprised by how accurate it is. That was when she realized that Mary isn't just any ordinary child. Later that day, the school principal, Miss Davis, is introduced to the class, and all the children treat her with respect. However, Mary, acting more casually, loudly asked the principal to call Frank to take her out of school. By the end of school that day, Frank arrives to pick Mary up, and Bonnie takes the opportunity to speak with him. She tries to convince Frank that Mary is not a typical child, but Frank brushes off her concerns, explaining that Mary simply used the Jaco-Trachtenberg method for the math problems, something he himself learned at a young age. Bonnie, still intrigued, looks up the method later and is impressed by it. In the meantime, Frank is seen working on a boat, and Mary asks if they can take it for a test drive. They spend time together at the beach, chatting about various things. Frank tells Mary that her mother would have wanted her to make friends. So, during an open day in school, Mary brings Fred to school and shows him off to her classmates. She explains that Fred only has one eye, and when the other children ask how he lost it, Mary tells that she doesn't know, as she found him in the trash and rescued him. Meanwhile, Bonnie continues to bond with Mary, giving her extra classwork to challenge her, knowing she can finish it quickly. Mary seems to enjoy the challenge, and the two share a warm, affectionate smile in the end. As Bonnie grows closer to Mary, she starts looking into the Adler family. She first tries to find information about Frank but comes up empty. Instead, she discovers details about Frank's late sister, Diane, a brilliant child prodigy in mathematics. MIT professor Seymour Shankland is quoted saying that Diane had an exceptional mind that could have changed the world. However, Bonnie's research also reveals that Diane tragically ended her life at the age of 27, leaving behind her daughter, Mary, in the care of Frank. With these findings, Bonnie decides to meet with Frank at a local bar, where Frank opens up to her about his sister. He recalls that Diane showed up at his house one evening with baby Mary, asking to talk. At the time, Frank was in a hurry to go on a date and told Diane he'd listen to her when he returned. That night, when Frank got home, he found Mary sleeping on the couch, while Diane was found dead on the bathroom floor. Frank admits that while it wasn't entirely his fault, he feels responsible and regrets not being there for his sister. Bonnie asks if there are any other family members, and Frank explains that Mary's biological father abandoned Diane within a month of their relationship, and his own mother is a strict, no-nonsense British woman. Some days later, as Mary was heading to school on the school bus, she notices one of her classmates struggling to carry a project. At first, she feels worried that her own project isn't good enough. That was before the boy is bullied by a 12-year-old, who trips him and causes his project to break. The other children join in teasing him, but Mary steps in to defend the boy. She tells the bullies to stop, and in the end, she eventually hits the bully in the face with a book she was holding. Frank is eventually invited to school, where he sees the bully boy, whose nose is still bleeding. He immediately checks on Mary, making sure she's all right before heading to the principal's office. Now with the principal, Frank is confronted with the importance of addressing Mary's recent behavior. The principal insists that violence is unacceptable, prompting Frank to assure her that Mary will understand this while expressing pride in his niece for standing up against a bully. During their conversation, Davis suggests that Mary's exceptional talents merit a place at the prestigious Oaks Academy for Gifted Education, where she could thrive intellectually. However, financial concerns lead Frank to hesitate. Davis then reveals that Mary would receive a full scholarship, eliminating any cost. Despite this, Frank refuses the offer, insisting that Mary should have a normal upbringing and attend a regular school. However, the decision leaves Frank uncertain if he's doing the right thing, and he shares the sentiment with Bonnie when she gently questions him after the meeting. Meanwhile, Mary takes responsibility for her actions, apologizing to her classmates and also asking the class to recognize the work their classmate, Justin, had put into his art project. Arriving at home later that day, Frank and Mary are surprised to find her grandmother, Evelyn, waiting for them. Evelyn presents Mary with an expensive laptop and a book on advanced algebra, but Mary shows little excitement for the book, remarking she has already moved on to studying differential equations. Frank ensures Mary thanks her grandmother for the gift. However, Evelyn is unimpressed with the modest living conditions. This fuels tension between the two as Evelyn voices her disapproval and calls for a more suitable environment for Mary, as she even threatens to involve authorities. Over lunch the next day, she warns Frank that legal action for custody of Mary may be imminent. Evelyn's belief that Diane would agree with her concerns, but Frank strongly disagrees. Evelyn accuses Frank of being unfit and eventually declares her intention to take matters to court. As time passed, Frank tried to be closer to Mary. During one of their hangouts, she asks him about God and faith. Frank admits he holds personal beliefs but avoids shaping hers, emphasizing the importance of forming her own opinions. They also talked about Roberta, their friendly neighbor. When the court session finally begins, Evelyn's intentions become clear. She plans to gain custody of Mary and take her to live in Massachusetts, offering her what she deems a better life. Seeing how the case was playing out in court, Roberta volunteers to testify in court to help Frank retain custody. However, she isn't eligible to testify as she is not family. Determined to keep Mary with him, Frank asks Roberta to babysit one night. She readily agrees, and Mary spends a joyful evening with her, as they sing and dance while having fun. Meanwhile, Frank and Bonnie share an evening out as they bond over drinks. Their relationship grew stronger as they even had an intimate encounter that evening at Frank's place. The following morning, while trying to quickly retrieve a CD from the house, Mary catches Bonnie sneaking out of Frank's room. This encounter embarrassed both Bonnie and Frank, and he reacted angrily. He feels his personal life is constantly intruded upon by Mary. Upset by the outburst, Mary runs off to hide in her room. However, the two later reconcile after Frank offers a heartfelt apology. In the meantime, Evelyn secures a brief visit with Mary in Boston. There, Mary sees family photos that offer glimpses into her mother and grandmother's past. Evelyn takes her to MIT and tells her stories about the 7 Millennium Problems and Grigori Perelman's work on the Poincare conjecture. Evelyn laments Diane's unfinished efforts to solve the Navier-Stokes equation, envisioning the accolades Diane might have achieved. Mary, inspired, shares her dream of one day being honored for her own intellectual contributions. During this visit, Evelyn introduces Mary to a professor, Shankland, who challenges her with an intricate math problem. Initially, Mary appears confused, leading Shankland to doubt her potential. However, as she returns home with her angry grandmother, Mary identifies that there is an error in the equation itself. When they returned, she made the necessary corrections and solved the problem. Shankland is left astonished, and when he questions why Mary didn't correct it in the first place, Mary tells him that her uncle always warns her not to correct adults. Returning home, Mary tells Frank that while Evelyn is kind in her own way, she doesn't want to live with her. Frank reassures Mary that she will stay with him. Eventually, a social worker, Pat, visits to evaluate Mary's well-being. During their conversation, Mary speaks warmly of Frank, recounting their bond over activities like watching ultimate fighting and reaffirming his promise to keep her close. Despite the challenges, Mary trusts Frank and believes in his commitment to her. When Pat asks Mary why she believes Frank wants to care for her, she responds confidently, saying he has always loved her from the very beginning, regardless of her intelligence. Back in the courtroom, the drama intensifies when Mary's biological father appears, siding with Evelyn for custody. However, Frank's attorney humiliates him by highlighting his ignorance. He doesn't even know Mary's middle name and has never met her. This lack of involvement helps Frank win the day in court. Later on, Evelyn tells Frank she doesn't like the rift between them, but Frank reminds her they've always been at odds. At home, Mary locks herself in her room, crying uncontrollably over the absence of her father, who made no attempt to visit her while in town. Frank, trying to lift her spirits, takes her and Roberta to a hospital to witness the birth of a baby boy. As they wait, Frank recounts Mary's own birth story, describing the joy and excitement surrounding her arrival into the world. In the end, Mary celebrates alongside the families in the maternity ward and her mood significantly changes. When the trial resumed, Evelyn was asked to take the stand. During her testimony, she talked about Dane playing baseball, and this prompted Frank's attorney to confront her about Diane's childhood. Evelyn's strict focus on Diane's academic pursuits, to the exclusion of a normal life or extracurricular activities, becomes a heated point of contention. The lawyer further recalls Diane's youthful rebellion when she ran off with Paul, her first love, to ski in Vermont. Evelyn's harsh reaction, which included legal action, devastated Diane, contributing to her attempted suicide in 1999. Evelyn defends her actions, insisting she tried to be a good mother. When Frank eventually testifies, he admits to working as a freelance boat repairman. Evelyn's attorney casts doubt on his ability to provide for Mary, citing concerns over her education, healthcare, and the incident where Mary confronted a school bully. Additionally, the attorney brings up Frank's past, including a bar fight where he spent a night in jail. Frank explains the fight as self-defense but acknowledges the difficulties he's faced. At the end of the sessions, Frank's attorney suggests an alternative, which was sending Mary to live temporarily with a foster family in Tampa. This arrangement would allow her to later decide her living situation when she turns 12. Although conflicted about this action, Frank ultimately agrees. He was totally heartbroken when he dropped her off at the foster home. Mary pleads tearfully with him not to leave her, reminding him of his promise never to abandon her. In the meantime, Frank and Roberta suffered through and had to battle with the pain of Mary's absence. As time passes, Frank confides in Bonnie, admitting he had considered child services before but couldn't bring himself to let Mary go. Now, he blames himself for their circumstances. One day, when he tries visiting Mary, the foster family tells him that she doesn't want to see him. This left him disappointed as he returned home. Several days later, Bonnie spots a poster advertising pets for adoption, including Fred. She informs Frank about this and he quickly rushes to the shelter. He eventually manages to rescue Fred along with 2 other cats. There he found out that Evelyn was behind Fred's abandonment. Furious about this, Frank and Roberta head to Tampa to meet Mary. Frank first retrieves some files as they continue on their journey. When they arrived, Frank suspected that Evelyn was around and he eventually presented Evelyn with a bombshell. The files were documents proving Diane had completed the proof for the Navier-Stokes equation. He reveals Diane wanted it published only after Evelyn's death, buttressing Evelyn's negative impact on Diane's life. Evelyn, overcome with guilt, finally gives up and allows Mary to return to Frank. Mary and Frank joyfully reconcile as they drive away with Roberta, relieved to be finally reunited. Back in the house, Evelyn scans through Diane's tear-stained notes and doodles. She eventually ends up breaking down in tears herself. Later on, she manages to contact MIT, reaching out to Shankland and requesting an appointment to publish. Towards the end of the movie, Mary begins attending university, eventually achieving milestones she dreamed of, but she still finds joy in her childhood activities. After class, Frank picks her up, handing her a copy of René Descartes' writings on existence. Mary playfully teases him about the philosophical gift, and their bond remains strong. He drops her off at a park where she joins a group of Girl Scouts, happily engaging in their activities. Watching her from afar, Frank smiles warmly at Bonnie, who was also at the playground. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. We'll love to hear from you. See you in the new year.